Hey students, it's Coach Hirsch. Today I'm going to talk to you about government revenue and spending. Where does the government get its money from, and what do they spend it on? You should be on Section 8 of your BOK. There are questions that are specifically related to this presentation, so as we work through this PowerPoint together, be sure to answer those. If you have any additional questions, of course, you can ask me or Ms. Rosenfeld, and we'll do our best to help you. So to start off with, let's look at tax structures. And what does tax structures mean? Basically means that taxes are kind of fall into certain categories when it comes to how people are taxed. The first one is progressive tax. And this one gets people fired up all the time because we're talking about higher income earners paying a higher percentage of income. So think about your multi-millionaire, you're an actor, or you're an athlete, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or something like that, or even if you're just making $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year. There are people out there that would suggest that you should pay, or they should pay, a greater percentage of their income because they make more money and they're more well off. So, for example, if I make $30,000 a year, I should only have to pay 20%. But if you make $3 million a year, you should be paying 35%. Now, this is a hot topic, like I said, and this will always get people fired up talking about it because a lot of times people that are successful feel that they should be entitled to keep their money, that they don't necessarily have a responsibility to pay more money for those people that perhaps haven't worked as hard as them, or whatever it might be. So this one is always one to get people's blood pressure going up. The next one is regressive tax. And this is when lower income earners pay a higher percentage of income. So if you think about sales tax, we pay 8.25% sales tax when we're buying things. So let's say I make $100,000 a year and I'm taking my two boys shopping and I buy a certain amount of clothes for them and I pay 8.25% sales tax on those clothes. That is not a high percentage of my income. However, what if I'm only making $15,000 a year and I'm taking two boys to get new clothes? 8.25% is a much higher percentage of my income, so it affects me more. So as the lower income that we have, we end up paying a higher percentage of our income. So a lot of people say that that's very unfair. But I don't know if there's necessarily been an alternative that's been presented that will work better, but it remains to be seen. And then proportional tax or flat tax. And this is basically when all taxpayers pay the same thing. So there's no real argument here. We would say, okay, if you make $1 million a year, you pay 20%. If you make $10,000 a year, you make 20%. It takes kind of the gray area out. What we have right now is basically somewhat of a progressive tax. Those that make more money generally are going to pay be in a higher tax bracket. So, what are the revenue sources for the levels of government? Well, first of all, when we say revenue, what does that mean? In this case, we're talking about government from tax and non-tax sources. For now, we just really focus on taxes, though. So, the federal government, they get primarily the largest portion of their revenue from individual income tax, and then also corporate income tax, which is tax on corporations' profits. The state government or state governments get their income from sales tax on the value of a product or percentage of the sale price. A state income tax as well. Not all states have a state income tax. California does have one, while Texas does not. And this is a lot of times why people have fled to Texas for jobs, because there is not a state income tax, and there are a lot of corporations that have moved here because that's a very attractive point for them and to attract talent to work at their companies. And then the other one you have for states is fees, driver's license fees, game permits, all that kind of stuff, vehicle registration, all that money goes into their account, I guess, if you will, as well. And then lastly, you have local government, which is, right now we just focus on property tax. They get a small portion of sales tax, but primarily they focus on property tax, and that's the taxes on assets, which is generally real estate, or if you're renting an apartment, your taxes are included in your rent. So what types of spending does the government do? The first one is mandatory spending, and these are things that they just have to spend money on. Entitlements, social welfare programs with specific requirements. So think about Social Security, welfare benefits. You've got to get money to the elderly. You've got to get money to the very poor, because otherwise they're not going to be able to live, and they're not going to be able to put food on the table for their families, and maybe get to work at some point. But it keeps them on their feet until they're able to At least the low income side, it keeps them on their feet until they're able to find a job and maybe turn things around. And then obviously for the elderly, they retire. They don't have another income source, so they've got to have that money. And then Medicare, that provides hospital and medical insurance for the elderly. And then Medicaid, which is federal state insurance program for low income people. Then you have discretionary spending. And what does that mean? Well, that means things that we can discuss, we can debate. We can decide how much we want to spend on this, or if we want to spend money on it at all. So obviously a large portion of the United States budget is spent on defense. Salaries for officers, weapons, military bases, homeland security, all that kind of stuff. We also spend money on interstate highway system and other transportation. We've got to keep bridges safe, building new highways, maybe monitoring ports, airports, things like that. And then natural resource and environment, taking care of our parks, cleaning up pollution. Education, we think about science, space, technology, other research. And then justice administration, which includes enforcement agencies and the federal court system, which is obviously expansive. Where does the money go? Well, again, just to kind of sum it up here, the federal government spends a lot on Social Security and entitlements, as we talked about before, national defense, and then interest on debt. At the local government level, they spend money on public schools, building new schools. Think about the one right across the street here from Centennial. That's going to be open next year. Teacher salaries, etc. Infrastructure, new parks, new roads, a rec center, fire and police. And then state government, you've got money that goes to education, state universities, low-income school districts, things like that, infrastructure, highways, state parks, visitor centers, and then health and human services, which go back to what we talked about before for insurance. And that's it. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me or Ms. Rosenfeld, and good luck as you keep working on your BOK.